Good evening. My name is Michael Milday, and I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Humanities at Western University. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to a special edition of Ivan Coyote's Active Voice, and a pleasure to welcome so many of you from so far away. Ivan is the current holder of the Alice Munro Chair in Creativity, and tonight they will be delivering their first Alice Munro lecture. Western University and the City of London, Ontario are situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and Attawandaron peoples. And this land is connected to several treaties that form an integral part of the history of this territory. It is a history that we don't always fully understand, or understand only from our own limited point of view. The university, as a place of higher learning, acknowledges that it has a special responsibility to confront and address this history and continue the work of reconciliation that is required. If you leave Western's campus by car via the East Gate, you will hit Richmond Street, one of London, Ontario's major roadways. If you then turn left and keep going at or around the speed limit for a little over an hour, you will find yourself in Wingham, Ontario, the birthplace of Alice Munro. In that town, some confluence of forces and experiences created the singular intellect and creative spirit that would turn Alice Munro into the greatest short story writer of her, of our, and perhaps of all time. Her writing is incredibly compelling, and at least some of its power is evident in the ways she's able to tell stories that take the particular lives of people living in specific parts of Huron County or Vancouver Island and make them matter to people all around the world. In 2013, Munro would be the first Canadian and one of only 14 women to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. In her journey from Wingham to the Nobel, Alice Munro spent 2 years at Western, studying English literature and publishing one of her earliest stories in the student literary journal Folio. In 1974-75, she returned as writer-in-residence, and in 1976 was awarded an honorary degree by the university. To recognize Alice Munro's achievements and celebrate her Nobel success, Western created the Alice Munro Chair in Creativity to give a platform for teaching, research, and community engagement to an extraordinary practitioner of the creative arts. We were honored to have Ivan Coyote join us on July 1st, 2020 for a 2-year sojourn. So at this point, I would like to introduce Otoniya Okot Bitek, who will give Ivan a proper introduction. Otoniya is an Acholi poet. She's currently a 2021 Jack and Doris Shadbolt Fellow at Simon Fraser University. Otoniya lives with gratitude on the unceded ancestral and traditional lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people in what we currently call Vancouver. Otoniya.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I wanted to do my land acknowledgement and I forgot that I'd put it in my bio, so I'll do it anyway because I feel that since I'm here in my living room in Vancouver, I want to be able to speak it out. I'm speaking to you all from the land of the Squamish, the First Nations, the Musqueam First Nations, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, lands that were never ceded, traditional, ancestral, and land that has been taken care of by these people. And I also want to say that the care continues, and we see this in the work of the land and water defenders in Wet'suwet'en territory. So I'm really happy to be here. My name is Otoniya Okot Bitek. Some of you know me as Julie or Julianne, and that's fine too. I am an Acholi woman, and I come from, I should remember where I come from. I come from northern Uganda, and mine is the Pachua clan. I would like it very much, and I see some people already writing in the chat where they're coming from. If you know the names of the First Nations or Aboriginal people or the indigenous people from where you're coming from, and the skies from under that shelter you, please write that in your chat. That would be really good. A proper introduction. How can I give a proper introduction? What I'm going to do is to say hello to you all, to welcome you here, and to say, to give some kind of context to which I'm coming to say, to which I'm coming to host this. I'm a big fan of Ivan's, and I'm a reader, I'm a teacher, I'm a friend, and Ivan's work, I taught Reverend Sinner not last summer, 2019 when it first came out. I convinced myself that I was the first person to teach this book because it had just come out, right? So I want to first begin by sharing a few words of the students from that class. So one person said, I didn't even know that form of literature existed. And another one said, Ivan's work changed my perspective of how to think about humans. And another one said, this work connects the humanity with identity. And another one said, expands the role of the storyteller. And another one said, naming matters, how they can affect the people around you and how they can identify, and how identifying someone as who they want to be identified is really important. And these are the things which we've been trying to say in our society for a long time. Call people who they want to be called. Use the pronouns that they want to. But in reading one text, one term, I have a whole class of 35 students who left knowing that this was their favorite book. I also then want to say that Ivan's work, in the words of my friend Chantal Gibson, is straight up humanity. These are stories that are not just works that bring us together. They're places where we can find community, no matter who we are. They're places that we can go home to. They're places that we can be listened to. They're places that we can love each other. We want to know how to love, how to care. This is the work that Ivan's work does for us. And for me, as I read through Care Of, I was thinking about how, and this is not original to me, when you're going for therapy and they tell you got to ground yourself. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you taste? What do you feel? Every single letter that Ivan has written in response to the letters that were written to them grounds the reader, grounds the person, not just the reader, the person who wrote the letter, but also the person, us, who are reading it. So thank you for this grounding. Thank you, Ivan, for this place where we can come home to. And to host you tonight, all of you, welcome to my kitchen table, which is also the corner of my living room. We have hundreds of people. We all cannot fit in this little place, but if you can sit with half a bum so that we can let everybody else squeeze in, we will let Ivan take it away and share with us. And I want to also say, finally, I want to begin with love. So I love you, Ivan. I'll see you on the other side, okay? And everybody, welcome.
I love you too, Otoniya. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. I'm also in London, which is also the rightful and true territory of the Anishinaabe, the Ottawandaron, the Haudenosaunee, and the Lenapehoek peoples. I am honored to be here. I am grateful that everyone is tuning in and here with us. I wanted to just be transparent and say that my performance, which is about to happen, Sarah and I pre-taped for numerous reasons. One being that the main one being is that this is my class, and as soon as I'm done here, I have to go and teach for 2 hours online. And as we all know, as educators, this has been a challenging time for students and for teachers and for the support staff in all of our educational institutes. And I wanted to be able to just be. So I'm going to be in the chat because this is how we communicate right now. So I'm going to be in the chat. I'm not going to be doing lots of research. I'm just going to sort of be in here and there, popping in and paying attention with half an ear to what I'm about to share with you. I want to thank Sarah McDougall, my partner, and our learning curve has been like this on the technical front for video stuff. She's an audio engineer. and a musician. So I landed in a really sweet spot for a global pandemic, as it turned out, if there's such a thing. And I'm so happy to see everybody here. Many friends in the chat already, and I return your love tenfold, 100-fold. I always think of that line from your poem that you read when we did the gig together at Simon Fraser, I guess about 2 years ago now, around this time of year, about how love is not a blanket but a cloud. So yeah, I won't try to encapsulate everything that beautiful poem is, but really please do check out Otoniya's work on her website. She's a beautiful human and a beautiful poet, and thank you so much for hosting us tonight, and thank you to Michael as well. And we have more thank yous to do afterwards, but we'll get to those after. So right now, Josh Lambier from WordsFest, my partner in all things webinar, he's going to share the video now. So I guess we'll take it away and just kick back. It is March 16th, 2021 today. It has been 1 year. Everybody remembers the week it all stopped, that weird week in mid-March of 2020, where the news about the virus wasn't coming from somewhere else anymore. Suddenly it was coming from our own hospitals, our own mouths. We were all breathing on each other still, and we needed to stop. I have been a touring artist now for 25 years, and like all live performers, the coronavirus grounded me profoundly, and overnight I went from never spending more than 4 days in a row at home for decades to the same 4 walls and roof for 370 days now. I got a text at 9:45 p.m. on Thursday, March 12th, 2020, that both of my shows the next day had been canceled. And by the following Monday, March 16th, most of the red dots on the next 3 months of my calendar had evaporated, along with my plans and my main source of income. My partner Sarah is a songwriter and touring musician, and we found ourselves sitting on the couch next to each other, answering emails and making a long grocery list with a lead-flavored knot growing in both of our bellies. Both of us had spent the better part of our best years practicing the craft of buying the gear for and logging the hours in to becoming the very best live performers we could be. And overnight, all of our talents had been rendered irrelevant in this global pandemic landscape. We did what everyone else we knew was doing. We bought a bag of rice and canned beans and counted how many rolls of toilet paper we had left. We watched the numbers tick upwards on the news, and we disinfected our groceries with our dwindling Lysol wipes. We told ourselves over and over how lucky we were to have a little money saved up, to have each other, to still be healthy. We will make the best of this time off of the road, we said. I can write some new songs, she said. I can work on my mystery novel, I said, except I couldn't. My words froze in my head when I tried to write about this pandemic present day. I spent hours staring at the flashing cursor on my computer screen. I made chili. I skipped rope outside in the carport because the gyms were closed. Imagining a world in this unimaginable time and place seemed impossible. Who could write fiction at a time like this? So I started answering my mail. Emails, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram messages, handwritten letters passed to me at the book signing table at a festival, a rain-soaked and blurry blue-inked note scrawled on the back of a pizza flyer and left under the windshield of my car after a gig. Since 2009 or so, I have been keeping both an electronic and a hard copy file of special letters. Ones I always meant to sit down and answer properly if and when I had the time. Well, if and when was now upon us, and so I did. Some of my replies stretched out into 4 or 5 pages. I answered each letter with a story that the original letter shook loose from my rib cage outside my office window. The snow melted and the green fingers of the garden started to burst out of the dirt in the backyard. I had the time and the stillness to watch the ants crawl over the peony buds and learn the names of the birds arriving and departing. This Ontario bird feeder we hung from the spruce tree. I had time to drink a second coffee in my bare feet. I had time to write letters. I'm going to read to you from selections from some of those letters and parts of my responses back to them, because this process and these letters and the resulting connections that they forged, they became a kind of a soul anchor for me, a means of tethering myself to others, a way to both listen to and tell a slower kind of story. I'm going to start with telling you about a Facebook message I received on February 3rd, 2020 from a woman named Adri, who wrote to me about losing her 21-year-old daughter, Kate, in April of 2019. She wrote to me about the power of stories, the power of a story to remember, to honor, and to heal. With the blessing and permission of Adri, I will now share with you a few parts of the very long letter I wrote her back. April 3rd, 2020. Dear Adri, first of all, please let me start off by offering you my condolences, whatever that might actually mean, to a mother who has lost her child. My condolences. I offer you my sincere condolences, my sympathy. I offer my pledge to you that I will continue to share my own stories so that they might manage to continue to find their way to you somehow and bring you even the tiniest comfort. I'm so grateful to receive these words from you. I am honored that you have trusted me with the small window that these letters offer me into your story and your life and your grief. I promise to choose my next words carefully and with all of the compassion and tenderness my own heart is capable of. Thank you for sending me that picture of your daughter, Kate. She was a beautiful young woman. She reminds me a little of my niece. Well, technically, Layla would be my second cousin. She's my cousin Dan's daughter, but in my family, she's called my niece. But anyways, in fact, I think there's even a photo out there somewhere of my niece Layla, with the very same hot pink streaks in her jet black hair, the same perfect black eyeliner and mascara as Kate wore in that picture, the same leather collar and chains, and nearly the same nose piercing. I bet if they had ever met, they would have drunk strong coffee with too much milk and sugar in it and exchanged sarcastic jokes while giving less cool passers-by immaculate side-eye between careful sips, so as not to ruin their perfect lip liner. I'm glad you and I got to shake hands at my gig last month, even though I didn't realize at the time that you were the woman who wrote me this letter. I've put all the pieces together now. That was a special gig that night at the library in Nanaimo. Some nights you can see and feel and hear the stories doing the magic that only stories can do in a room full of listening hearts. It is a sacred thing. It is a blessed exchange, and I am always crumpled and humbled and healed afterwards. Lately, when I'm about to get up on a stage, I do this thing. Just before I start, I imagine that there's a giant seam that runs from the center of my collarbone, just at the base of my throat, straight down past my sternum, right down to about where my belt buckle sits. And I imagine that my rib cage can be split open by that seam, that my heart and my guts are behind 2 double doors made out of my ribs. And just before I step on stage, I open those doors all the way, so there is nothing hard or made of bone between my inside bits and the people I am about to speak to. This spills me and holds me all together at the same time somehow, and allows me to step right into the insides of the story I am telling, my own heart pumping there in both of my open hands. If I do it right, I can feel it. I can feel the story looping out of me and into you, leaving little bits of itself behind, and then sailing back into me, still familiar, still mine, but not the same anymore somehow, grown bigger now and carrying tiny parts of every heart in the room along with it. I can never sleep when I crawl into whatever rented or borrowed bed I end up in after, exhausted and elated. Believe me when I say that I still hold a little sliver of your grief inside of me. It lives now in the bones in my back, and it comes and sits some days on my shoulders and reminds me why. It's why I recognized your daughter in that picture you sent me, even though I don't think I ever got to meet her. I carry her with me, and I remember. Her story reached in and rattled the ghosts that remain in me. Storytellers, we are not meant to forget these things. We are tasked with saving them. Thank you for writing to me, Adri. Thank you for shaking my hand in Nanaimo. I promise you I will never forget your words. They have their own little room inside of me now, and the fire is warm. And you and Kate are always welcome to meet me there. I will leave the light on for you. With much love, Ivan. I'm going to read you from the next letter now. June 9th, 2017. Dear Ivan, I attended your storytelling session at the Research and Statistics Conference today in Terrace. After hearing from you, I was feeling quite vulnerable, on the cusp of crying if I tried to express to you then all the things I wanted to say, which now seems ironic and shows me just how much work I still have to do on myself. When you had mentioned the way in which emotion is considered a feminine thing, and therefore a weak thing, and while my peers nodded, I could only worry that in reality, they may not be so understanding. I'm a cisgender female, mostly closeted bisexual, and I was raised in a conservative Christian home and school. So when I heard a Mormon colleague strike up a conversation about religion with you, I eavesdropped. I loved your response to her, never dismissing faith, but dismissing the way it has been perverted, from love and inclusion to hate and exclusion. From a recognition of the beauty of the human spirit and body in all its forms, reflecting the ungendered God, to this small, limited acceptance of some forms. I realize now that my upbringing has stripped me of the confidence to do the things that interest me, or to not even consider some things as an option for myself. My father's words and the church's rules truly did set me upon a specific path. As a research analyst at my institution, this distrust in my own abilities as a queer woman meant I didn't even apply for this job in the first place until the male manager recruited me. For the first 2 years, I didn't believe I had the math or logic skills, as that is a man's brain, and the school I had grown up in left me with a grade 8 level math, and I never attempted a math course in college. It was 2 years before I trusted I could count, 3 years before I felt like I understood just what I was counting. I'm coming up on my 4th anniversary in this job, and I've finally taken a first-year university-level stats course, which I aced. I'm also enrolled in a database administration program, a male-dominated profession, and finding success. But more than that, finding that I've been doing that work all along, but without those labels that have intimidated me in the past. that were not for me. Hearing someone acknowledge something so simple as you have been discouraged from discovering your full potential, and that wasn't right. In a conference where I feel uneducated compared to my peers, unable to contribute to discussions because I don't trust my own judgment. To have someone send the message that you are capable of more than what everyone else has been telling you really just sewed up this little patch of my teenage ragged heart that has just barely hung in there through the years. I wanted to say thank you in person, but I don't think I could have gotten any other words out. Thank you for providing those words, that widening of options beyond gender, and empathy for and non-dismissal of faith, and the immediate acceptance that being queer, feminist, and faithful is not an oxymoron. From teenage me to adult me, I cannot express fully how healing and hopeful that makes me. I'm so grateful that our paths crossed just briefly enough to hear a few words I never knew I needed. That they were from a stranger who made my experience seem a little less strange was an added blessing. Prayers to you on your journey home. Melinda. July 21st, 2020. Dear Melinda, thank you for your beautiful letter. Before I begin to do it any justice, please let me start with apologizing to you that it took me 3 years, 1 month, and so far, 10 days to answer you. If it makes any difference, your email has sat in a starred folder in my inbox all of this time because the moment I first read it, I knew it was one of those special letters. The ones that I really had to sit down and search inside of me to respond to properly. I remember the day we met very well. I remember you. You were sitting at one of the large round tables on my left, near the back of that beautiful longhouse at the university in Terrace, close to the fold-out tables at the back that held the coffee urns and the croissants and the muffins. I do recall. While I was preparing my storytelling sessions for that day, I do recall wondering just why I had been invited to speak to a room full of statisticians and mathematicians, and why they cared to listen to a transgender writer tell stories anyway. But then I met you all. And I told some stories, and you listened, and you laughed, and you cried, and then I listened to your questions and your stories, and we all talked, and the sense of it all started to take shape in my head. I remember that question from the evangelical Christian woman. I've had to learn over these many years to tactfully field questions aimed at me from evangelicals of all stripes. And it is true. What I said to her that day, I don't remember my exact words, but I know in my heart what I believe. And I know what it was that I had been asked to come there and do. And I have grown to consider these moments as divine opportunities for me to do what I think of as something close to sacred work. When a person who has been taught, like I knew immediately that she had been taught, to hate and revile someone like me, stands up to ask me a question, I must reach across that room and find my way past her fear and dogma and doctrine and into the good part of her heart. But to locate that part of her heart, I must make myself truly believe that it exists, even if her body language or words are screaming otherwise. Or I might miss it in the dark and the confusion. And the whole room is watching us. I must not stomp on her beliefs. I must instead step softly around them and try to speak to the tender insides of most of us that want to choose love and connection and acceptance. I am tasked with making her believe, even for just a second, that her God would never make her choose between her faith and the humanity and rights of any of his creations to peacefully exist. It is not important to me in those few seconds that everyone in the room agrees with me, but it is vital that they witness her, allowing her heart to stretch open just enough to make even the possibility of room for people like me. To do this, I have to make the tiny, terrified teenager that still lives inside of me believe that nobody's God hates me, and that it really is only humans that are capable of twisting faith into bigotry. I woke up this morning to the news that Trump has passed a new law allowing homeless shelters to refuse to house transgender people. And a memo from his administration was leaked to the media that includes instructions on how to spot a transgender woman to target them for discrimination. The memo says, homeless shelters can use factors such as height, the presence, but not the absence, of facial hair, the presence of an Adam's apple, to find suspected trans women. Right below that news was another article about how the University of Maryland St. Joseph Medical Center is being sued after refusing to treat a transgender man. Refusing to treat. The facility defended its decision, stating it was following the ethical and religious directives for Catholic health care services drawn up by church officials. There are days when I am simply not capable of making myself believe that I can find the good parts in the hearts of some humans or their gods. When it comes to using faith as a shield to hide your hate or excuse your bigotry or give yourself a reason to kill or let someone die, well, I cannot think of a greater sin. I confess I cannot imagine believing in any God that would condone refusing another soul something as simple as shelter or medical care or an education for any reason. I speak to a lot of teachers and teacher candidates and school staff and administrators as part of the work that I do in schools. I do this to quiet the murmurings of my own high school hallway ghosts. To sing a lullaby a little louder than my own change room-inspired nightmares and school bus flashbacks. I tell a little story about the time I ended up being housed in the men's dormitory at a university in Saskatchewan during the very same weekend that an evangelical Christian basketball tournament was happening on the very same campus. I joke about imagining pre-top surgery me showering naked in a giant tiled room full of evangelical Christian farm boys from rural Saskatchewan. I do this to illustrate how hard it can be for trans and non-binary people to access things like public schools and places. I almost always get a letter afterwards, usually from an evangelical Christian gym teacher, often from Saskatchewan, who takes issue with me drawing any kind of attention to the adversarial relationship between his faith and my people. I muster up all the patience and respect that I am able to, and then I ask him who he feels is most responsible for the well-known conflict between his religion and trans people. I ask him, what is he doing right now to reconcile this relationship? I ask him if he has reached out to any of his fellow parishioners to support them when their church is telling them they must choose between their God and loving their own children. I always wonder about the queer kids in his gym class. I worry for the trans kids he is teaching. I think about the girls' volleyball team he coaches and the messages he is leaking into their hearts about who they are and what they are capable of and how they should feel about their bodies. And I question and question again and again why I feel I must always be so careful not to step on his faith when I am invited to places and specifically asked to speak to and undo the harm his beliefs are capable of doing to every kid he wields his words over at night in the dark when I cannot sleep. I hope and I pray to my own gods and saints that he doesn't have a queer son at home, that he will never have a trans daughter. And then I promise myself again that I will be there for all of his queer children, that I will show up for all of his trans family should they ever come to me asking for the love and acceptance that he was unable or unwilling to give them. I will be their cool uncle, the aunt that always just listens without interrupting. I will be their brother who picks them up and drives them to a safer place, their sister who saves their supper in a Tupperware in the fridge for them and lets them do a couple of loads of laundry while they sleep on the couch. Melinda, I have read and reread your letter. I keep stopping to breathe at the bit where you write about the many years you believed that your girl's brain was not capable of doing math. How that belief has wormed its way into your head and still nibbles away in there. To this day. Did you come to the evening gig that night in the same longhouse? Do you remember that logger? The logger dude? That stood up that night and confessed to the entire room that he wrote poetry and that the pressure to always be a tough guy had hurt him deeply his whole life and had even harmed his relationship with his own son. He took off his sweat-stained caterpillar ball cap and held it in both hands in front of his chest as he spoke, and then he apologized for the tears that he could not force to stop from falling. I was reminded again, for the 10 millionth time, how much I believe that we need to dismantle our gender box prisons and free men like him, too. That he has suffered every bit as much as the little boy who always wanted to play the flute and wear tiaras, and the little girl who grew up believing that she couldn't do math. If there is one wrong thing in this world that I could undo right now, it would be to drain away all the shame that we have been taught to feel whenever we cry. It is not as simple as teaching ourselves to not see crying as weak or as feminine. I don't want to teach that crying is a show of strength either. I want us to see tears as a simple byproduct of thinking or feeling or listening or speaking to the world around us. I want us to see crying as being inextricably linked to living. Like exhaling is to the act of breathing. I think one of the most valuable things this culture steals from our men is their tears. I'm so grateful that you were in that room in Terrace that day, Melinda, and that you found things in the stories I told that morning that I didn't even realize were hidden there in my words. I am glad that you have found a place to keep your faith and your feminism and your queerness all safe and tucked together, intact, inside of you. I take heart in that fact. I really do. Thank you for reminding me again of how powerful a story can be, and how much of that power is found inside of the person who is listening, and that power to transform is not only held or handled by the heart of the one who is doing the telling. If this world should ever heal itself enough that we are able to gather in large groups one day, and if I am ever lucky enough to be asked to tell stories in a crowded room again, when and if anyone stands up after and asks me a question about that crossroads where their faith and my existence seem to collide, I will think of you, and I will remember your letter, and I will try to find enough room in my heart to keep my faith in all of us. With much love and respect, Ivan. And the last letter I want to share with you came from my friend Nico. Nico wrote me a letter about the letter she almost wrote me 3 years ago, shortly before we met in real life for the first time. Nico writes, I had this letter planned out after a reading and a Q&A that you did at the Kwanlundan Cultural Center in Whitehorse a few years back. I wrote this letter in my head, walking back to my apartment, up Black Street in the dusk of a Yukon night. How I wish I would have stuck around to meet you, shake your hand and say thank you, tell you how much it meant to see someone like me stand on a stage and talk and be joyful, but emotional, strong and serious and funny, how much it meant to see a trans person made tangible in a place where it felt like an anomaly. I was in those early awkward stages of being out. To most of the people in that room, it looked like I had just shaved the beard that lived on my face for 15 years. But to me and my heart, I knew that my relationship to these people and my home was changing forever, that I was changing forever. This is a scary time in my life. We're both from the same town, the same streets and faces, and we both know how it feels to challenge the expectations of who we are as Yukoners. I was scared of myself, of my neighbors and friends, but most selfishly, for myself. I never did meet you that day. I was too scared to say hi and acknowledge how real this all felt, but we met shortly thereafter. I still remember going on drives with you, sitting in the passenger seat of a Nissan Pathfinder, looking out over the roofs of a city I knew I was leaving forever. The sky pink and blue and white, or for a fortuitous color scheme. You would offer guidance and wisdom for the road ahead, as if you were packing me an emotional bug-out bag for my journey. I still carry that bag with me, and the idea of writing you this letter still feels difficult. Not because it's challenging, but because it's hard to condense down just how much it's meant to me as a trans person that grew up in the Yukon to be connected to another. It's been the greatest joy in my life to know that there is always at least one person that understands both where I came from and also where I'm going. Love, Nico. So, I don't really expect that anyone who is not a trans Yukoner actually knows what it feels like to make a friend who is another trans Yukoner, but I'm going to include parts of my response to Nico in an attempt to describe it to you. Dear Nico, I remember my cousin Dan calling me up earlier that summer to tell me that he had this friend I had to meet that you had just come out as trans, that there was now another trans person in town who was from the Yukon, like really another trans Yukoner, not someone who had just moved up from a big city down south, but someone who knew. Someone who knew all the back roads and the secret party spots and who had lived through F.H. Collins and senior secondary school and only bought their coffee from Midnight Sun, never that place on Main Street, and who remembered what used to be where the Walmart is now and what the waterfront looked like before all those condos were built, and whose mom knew my mom. Because my mom totally knows your mom. My dad bought all the glass for his house from your dad. You know what I mean. Someone who had always had a block heater installed in their vehicle, even the really shitty ones. Someone who knows the smell of pine sap in July and the taste of frozen over the winter cranberries when the snow first melts. Someone who loves 11 a.m. winter sunrises, just like I do. I remember when we first started hanging out, drinking too much coffee, borrowing my mom's truck to drive up to the Grey Mountain Lookout and talk. I would have these almost overwhelming waves of emotion build in my chest and then burst and race down into my gut and then upwards toward the crown of my head, out to my fingertips, this hot and chaotic wave running around, kicking inside of me with no real means of escape. This strange mix of feelings would gather and pool behind my eyes, kind of pressurized. It's hard to describe. I would sit in the driver's seat and listen to you talk, your profile, edged by sunrise, the sky awash of cool pink and blue, northern light, the truck smelling like coffee and wet wool and mittens, and I would feel fiercely protective of you. Fear and hope and love and joy and anger would all fight in my throat. It was like my heart knew that our hometown, stretched out below us on the other side of that cracked windshield, was gonna come for you. And I would never really be able to position myself directly in front of you and fend it off. I would only ever be able to stand behind you or beside you, at very best. I knew, even in that moment, the most I could ever do would be to be there for you, to lean on, or maybe to catch you if you fell back when it inevitably happened. The Yukon makes all kinds of space for women to connect with their masculine selves, and in some ways the celebration of axe-wielding, tire-changing, self-sufficient northern women had offered me a buffer, a bit of a force field, as younger me stumbled into and found my butch self and later stretched and grew into my trans and non-binary skin. I knew it would be so much different for you, shedding your beard and standing up and being seen as your trans feminine self. I don't blame you for leaving. When you told me you were moving to Toronto, your words traveled right out of the speaker in my cell phone directly into my 18-year-old baby butch spine. I will never forgive our hometown for raising the asshole who snuck up behind you and sucker punched you that night, right outside of your apartment. I know we still don't know who he was, and probably never will, but in my heart, I believe that he probably once walked the halls of F.H. Collins Senior Secondary School, just like we did. I know in my heart he was not a stranger, and that truth slays me. It truly does. I hate that you felt like you had to leave. But I get it. I do. I remember when I left for the first time, for real. packing all my stuff into that shitbox of a van and steering due south alone with the stereo cranked and the Alaska highway dust in my teeth, I knew that place could not change fast enough to keep up with who I needed to become. I knew I could not unravel myself with all of my history gathered around me, repeating over and over who I used to be, who I was supposed to be. Pat's daughter. Dan's cousin. Florence's oldest grandchild. Carrie's big sister. But I didn't leave town with a black eye like you did. And I will never forget that reality. Last night when I was reading your email again, I couldn't stop thinking about that time we all went to the hot springs. I think it was January 2019. I remember all 5 of us entering the women's change room, and you and I both falling very silent, slipping out of our parkas and snow boots and quickly donning bathing suits. In the very last stretch of benches by the door that led to the pool, I was mostly staring at the floor, like I always do. Heart pounding, just a little, like it always is in those gendered and policed spaces. I glanced up to check on you, and our eyes met. And I cannot even say how much I loved you in that moment. I cannot describe the immense relief, the giant 50-year-old breath I exhaled into the small space between us, 2 of us, with backup. Knowing that if anyone fucked with us that night in the change room or in the pool, that we had each other, and Inga and Antoinette and Sarah too. 2 Yukoners, a German, a Tebegonian, Torontonian, and a Swede. I felt like I had a giant, fanged and clawed mother grizzly bear living just under my tender skin. And we would both be safe. We were all safe for the first time, I think, maybe ever in my life. I changed into my swimsuit in a public pool, completely unafraid. Do you remember that morning I tried telling you in my mom's truck up on Grey Mountain that the big city trans community might not be the welcoming, accepting, blissful, soft landing that I would like it to be for you? You sipped your oat milk latte and nodded. But I could tell that in your head you were patting me on the shoulder and saying, "Okay, Uncle Ivan, okay, old fella, I'm listening, but I know it will be different for me." I so wish that it had been different for you. I wish trans people could come together better, that our own pain and trauma didn't get in the way so much. I wish we could trust one another more, forgive each other easier, welcome and hold, and teach each other without punishing those of us who are newer or older or younger or who arrive on our doorsteps without the right words or clothes or politics. I wish we didn't turn so much of the hate aimed at us inward and flip and bite our brothers and sisters and siblings simply because of their proximity, because they are available, and because they are so much easier to sink our teeth into than our real enemies are. They call this lateral violence, which is a useful term to a point, but one that does not fully describe how we can also harm those above us, and especially under us, and who arrive after us, and who we were meant to follow as well, not just those directly next to or around us. I wish we had the same patience and compassion for each other that we muster up on the regular and extend to our families, our co-workers, to some confused stranger in a public bathroom at the mall. We are so used to being given nothing that we do not yet know how to gracefully inherit anything. And some of us are terrified that if we share what we have fought for and earned, that we will be left without enough. The lesson I take from this is to make room for each and every one of us to bring ourselves, imperfect and carrying our mistakes still on our backs, into the change room. It is the only way forward I can see myself walking towards. Nico, I want you to know how much your friendship means to me, how much I cherish our shared history, the common dirt caught in the treads of our boots. I have watched you grow your bangs out and stretch and become your true and beautiful self over these last few years with such pride and hope for you. I have found so much comfort and solace in the friendship and trust that we have built between us over the last 3 years, and I have learned a lot from standing next to you. Fangs and claws, hidden, but always ready. I hope we get to watch each other grow very old. I hope we mend many tears together and shed many tears and laugh until we pee our snow pants a little one day. I hope one day we are both able to forgive Whitehorse and drive up Grey Mountain and park at that first lookout by the graveyard there and stare down at all those roofs and those thin straws of wood smoke reaching up into the cold sky and marvel at how much everything has changed and how good it feels to come home. I know I've said this over the phone to you more than once, but here it is on the page and in the official archive. I am grateful to count you as family. With much love, Ivan. Thank you all for being here with me tonight. I shared with you tonight some of the connections and compassion and pain and learning and love and humanity that stories have brought into my life. I truly believe that in the end, all we take with us are our stories. The most important things we leave behind are our stories. We are remembered and changed and made better by our stories. I want to thank the University of Western Ontario's Faculty of Arts and Humanities for helping me build and keep this space for us to gather in this way in this year. Stories are grand and holy receptacles for us to collect and share and celebrate our lives in all of their shapes and languages and lessons. I hope you heard a sliver of a story tonight that you will hold on to and remember tomorrow. A story that will help you see yourself or understand another. A story that you can keep with you until we can meet and gather again in person. And in the meantime, please write me a letter. With much love, Ivan Coyote. You with us, my friend?
Yes, I'm here. I was frozen for a sec there, I guess. Yeah, that was astounding. That was good.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for hosting us tonight.
How are you feeling?
It's very weird to watch yourself. And then I'm not sure if you've been following the chat. I'm following it as much as I'm able to, but there's I first have to shout out to Nico was there, one of the letter writers. Adri was there, the first letter writer. yeah, so and then there was like Paula, now Morrison. I know her as Paula White, my friend from there. So there's all of that. So it's weird. I'm learning this is a means of feeling like I'm having a live performance. Like this is another weird means of connection. And yeah, so we were going to do a little chat for like,
yes.
I'll just try to get myself together. I'll drink some water.
Okay. You drink some water, and I'll take the time right now to say some thank you that I wish I'd said earlier on, but this is just as good time as any, because earlier on when I wanted to say hi, I was a little bit nervous of taking too much time. So let me do my thank yous now. I'm really thankful to Ivan, you, for inviting me to do this, but also thankful for the people who are hosting you and the position that you have, the assistance of the Faculty of Arts, I have to read this, and the Faculty of Arts and Humanity at Western, and the Hume Cronin Fund, the Department of English and Writing Studies, School for Advanced Studies in the Arts and Humanities, and the Film Studies Department, and London WordFest. And in particular, and especially, I wanted to thank Josh and you, Sarah, for having such exquisite craft to put this together. That was a great video. Wow.
Yeah, Sarah, we've learned, well, she already was very, very, very knowledgeable. I should say, I have learned a lot. My learning curve in terms of technical stuff has been fantastic. And I also now have to, my mom just went in the chat. So way to get on Zoom, way to figure out how to make a comment in the chat. Like everybody's just learning so much about technology. My mom, I have to thank my mom for being my mom and being such a great supporter. Mom, I'm wearing those pink camouflage underwear that you got me for Christmas. And seriously, like I opened them up, pink, like baby pink and blue, like basically trans flag camouflage underwear. And she bought them. She somehow procured them in the Yukon and gave them to me as a present for Christmas, sent them from Whitehorse to London. And I opened it up and I said to Sarah, I'm like, I've never felt my gender identity so seen in an item of clothing in my life as these underwear. And then I told my mom that, and she thought I was being facetious or like sarcastic. And I'm like, no, I'm really. So I'm super glad my mom got to, yeah. And I'm a bit homesick because there's so many Yukoners in the chat too.
Hi, Ivan's mom. Thank you for being here.
This is hopefully you get to meet her. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a bit of sun coming in through my blinds and I can't do anything about it. So you see the thing on my face. It's what it is, as people say, right?
It is what it is. It's also like just shining the light on your beautiful head. So
thank you.
All right. So we should chat for a bit and then I gotta go teach my class.
Yeah, you gotta go teach.
You better have watched this. You better not just eating snacks in the kitchen. Anyway.
Okay. I also want to say my own thanks to the folks at the Doris and Jack Shadbolt Fellowship, which I'm holding right now, which allows me to have the time to do these kinds of things. So, and they're very cool. And you had that position, and I went to you, and we laughed so hard during the workshopy thing, right?
That's how we met.
Yeah. No, it's not.
Well, we met at the event at the Friendship Center prior to that, and we had met at a Vancouver Writers Festival thing as well, like at the.
That was the last time we met, right?
I don't know.
2018.
It's been a few years. It's been a few years now. Yeah.
I have been reading you, and then I met you. So in my head, I've always known you, but it's okay. That's all right. I want to say I'm really grateful for your work, because your work imagines us, allows us to imagine and work towards a world that is free for all of us, and a world where we can be ourselves freely. And it opens up spaces to invite us to the kitchen table, which we're sitting at right now, right? And to pour some tea and have a laugh. Your work is really, really intimate. I'd said this at the beginning about how you ground us. And so folks who are listening can remember the taste of coffee, the smell of pine, the sight of the sky. All those are grounding mechanisms in place, right? So that when there is a world that we live in, which does not allow us to have a name that we can call ourselves, or have a space where we can go to the bathroom freely, right? Mm-hmm. In a story, all of those things are possible, all of them. And you said yourself that a story is a sacred thing, right? It is magic, and we are not meant to forget. We're the storytellers, these are your words. We are tasked with remembering that. So you're not just telling stories, you're also holding stories, and you're also remembering stories, right? So this is freedom work, right? I want to bring in Richard Wagamis, who you quoted before, who said, "Who would rather tell our stories but us?" And your response to him, or maybe even a little bit later, this is from the BC Federation 2018 convention, you said, you want to write stories of joy, triumph, love, acceptance, inclusion, stories of family and redemption, written by us, written for us, and written about us, right? So this is the work, creating spaces where we, whoever we are, can be, right? And so that said, I want to turn to thinking about writing, and you wanted to write fiction. You really wanted to write fiction. Maybe you started to write fiction even. But now this pandemic has, I guess, turned the focus to writing letters. You've been writing letters for a while, though. You had it in Gender Failure. You had it in Tomboy Survival. No?
Yes.
Tomboy Survival Guide, Reverend Sinner. Now you have it in Carol. So letter writing has been your thing for a while, for a long while, right? So can you tell me since you've been writing fiction, how different is it from writing not fiction? I want to suggest that it's the same thing, but you tell me what you think.
Well, I learned the love of writing letters from my grandmother, Patricia. Mm-hmm. That's my paternal grandmother, my dad's mom. She passed away coming up on, I guess it'd be coming up on 4 years ago now. And she was a letter writer. In fact, back home in Vancouver, it's tucked away safely. And I should have brought them with me for this time, but I didn't. Are all her letters. My Uncle Rob scooped up all her correspondence and put it into a big box for me. So, but it was her, and her and I wrote letters. In fact, I have a handwritten, a snail mail letter that she sent me when I was doing the writer in residence in 2012, I think it was, at Western. She was really chuffed to send it to me at the university. And I think had she been around and lived to see me, she loved Alice Munro's short stories, loved Carol Shields. She loved like Canadian women fiction or writers of all sorts. It really resonated with her. And she was born in one half of what we now know as Thunder Bay and grew up in Saskatchewan. So she especially loved Carol Shields and Margaret Lawrence and those women who wrote stuff really rooted in those places. And yes, I was writing a mystery novel. But I don't know that I really truly know how to write fiction, to write total fiction, to be honest with you. Because it's the mystery novel, and I'm still working on it. As soon as this book gets out the door, I've been actively working on it for a while. It's sort of a fictionalized version of three. It's turned out to be 3 stories that really did happen to me and to my friends when we were all kids growing up in the Yukon. I've sort of expanded and I've twisted all the, but it's still grounded in these real stories that happen. In fact, Paula White's here. I was on the phone with her a couple of months ago talking to her about and there's a couple other folks I'm going to track down who are also here tonight. I want to talk to about, these kind of 3 very massive things that went on. One was witnessing a small boy in the last days of grade 3 be struck and killed by a school bus in our schoolyard. another was the disappearance of my neighbor in 1986, and he disappeared, and they found his remains 9 years later. And so I was taking those kind of like traumas, really, I guess, in a way. And so I don't know that I'm actually writing fiction. I'm writing fiction that is grounded and based in things I understand via my nonfiction skills, I guess. Does that sort of answer your question?
It sort of answers my question, and I'm sorry I was a little bit facetious by saying that I think it's the same thing. But you do the same work, or similar work of trying to get at the truth, and to find a space to talk about what happened, right? Yes,
and in some ways, the more you embed it in fiction, I found this when I was writing my novel Bogrip that came out in 2007, I think it was. It was a lot about masculinity. I was trying to invent a mechanic from Alberta who wasn't just like a poster boy for toxic masculinity. And so I found that I could actually write the truth about some of the good men I know in my life and draw from them and create this composite character and be strangely more authentic and honest about some parts of his character than I could be was I writing nonfiction about that included the people I was drawing on in real life to create this so-called fictional character. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
well, because in a fiction things are more elastic. You can twist things to tell the truth in a clearer way. I mean, nonfiction, you're stuck with the age of somebody, for instance, or when they were born, right?
Yeah. Or you'll just hear about it later at the kitchen table, like in my family. Because if there's 15 of us sitting at the kitchen table, there's about 35 versions of the truth of what happened in the story, right? As they are very well versed in reminding me.
But the truth is the one you feel. It's not necessarily the one you hear.
Yeah.
Right?
And I'm always like, sure. I mean, that's how you saw it. But, absolutely write your own book. Write it down. I'll help you.
And yeah. Okay. I was going to go into family remembering of things and how if it's an event and my sister said, yeah, but you did this. No, I did not do that. And, you're arguing and they have a memory of what you did and you don't have that memory. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I want to ask you also about, so you just mentioned masculinity. And I know you've thought about imagining a better masculinity. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Oof, that's a huge question.
I can pass it. We can pass it if you like.
I think, and I write about this because this happens, this book is essentially an intergenerational memoir, in lots of ways. Like there's a lot of elders writing me, older queer people, older trans people, parents, grandparents writing me saying that they feel this disconnect with the youth. They long for some kind of connection, but they don't know how to either forge those connections or, and then I have all these younger queer and trans, especially trans and non-binary youth writing me saying like, I don't have enough elders. There's like you and Leslie Feinberg and Kate Bornstein and a couple of other ones that have for somehow come across their radars, but they don't feel that connection. So I have these like, I'm not caught in between, but I'm positioned in this place where the elders and the youth are writing me. So this is my book is this offering to them. And a lot of it is about like how we model ourselves and role models. And so it comes up a lot in what we're talking about. And it fit really closely into like the personal work I've tried to do in becoming whether I'm seen as masculine or masculine identified, there's all this blurry space in there because there's how I feel and where I situate or where I place myself on that, in the middle of that binary. And then there's how I'm seen. And those are two different things, but I still have to deal with the consequences or the effects of both of those, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. So I feel like a lot of the work I've been doing myself in the last 10 years or so, 5 years especially, I would say, is investigating masculinity and investigating these role models that I inherited that were very flawed in many ways, that I had to often pick through a bunch of nonsense, like to get to the things that I, and then I think that, like everything, for me, it's been like a reevaluation as we move forward in these conversations, right? As we move forward, and and how do we build a world and communities where, because we can't fix misogyny without men, we know this is why this is a huge conversation. So yeah. I mean, that's kind of ongoing work. And then it's like, if I'm now somehow magically, I don't know how this has happened, 52 years old, and we had this conversation. I know that we're close in age, and whether I acknowledge it or not, or whether I'm ready to be that or not, I'm often the oldest person in the room, especially when I'm doing work with, like, at schools and stuff like that. I'm older than the prime minister. This seems magical to me. I don't know. And I've, this is where I'm at. So I'm like, okay, if I'm going to be looked to as a role model of any sort, or as, as someone who anyone comes to for any reason, then what work do I have to do to deserve that?
Right.
What work do I have to do to embody and fix my own self so that I deserve that, I guess.
And so it's a way of uncoupling what we now call toxic masculinity, the toxicity away from the masculinity, right? So masculine can be a whole self that is not necessarily toxic to the rest of us.
Because how do we move forward where, like, to me, like, coming to my own place and my own authentic true self is part of that, is an embodiment of my own masculinity. That said, part of the work that I've been doing was, in the last 5 or 6 years, was like, I felt like I left one binary and went to another, and I tried to fit into, and that was flawed in itself too. So I'm like, who do I actually, as I was gearing up to turn 50, I spent most of that summer in the bush, in Atlan, like off the grid and away from 100 kilometers away from a cell phone signal. And it offered me a lot of time to think. And one of the things I thought a lot about was, who am I really? Like, who am I really? Like, I love pink. I've always loved pink. I just shed it as a kid, as a reaction, not because I had a problem with the color pink, or so, and it's not that it's gender is about colors, because it's really not, but I mean, just truly sort of reinvestigating, like, all the messages that we all have to sort of sift through and sort through and discard, on this path to embodying a kind of masculinity, or something in between that, all of that, that I can feel proud about, and that I can feel like is still feminist, and still honors and uplifts and recognizes the other parts of me, and the divine parts of everybody. How are we going to fix the world if we tell half of it that it's toxic in its nature, and that there's no room for movement there or change? I don't know. I'm rambling a little bit.
It's great. It's great. That was what I was after. But now I'll come right back around to the self, right? And to think about how this is possibly our last question, unless you want to keep chatting.
We have so much work to do in my class.
So one question?
Okay, yes.
Okay, so it's an important one. It's the one that I like to ask folks when I get a chance. Is about being exposed to so many stories and all kinds of different kinds of stories. And so I want to ask you, how do you protect yourself from damaging and traumatic stories? And what do you do to take care of yourself?
Well, we talked a bit about that when we were talking about this part of the which I really feel like I've learned how to do this in a safer way. Because not everybody does mean well. And, you know, like especially in internetlandia, of course, there's a kind of cruelty, even in queer and trans spaces, that it's kind of cool to be mean or dismissive sometimes, it feels like. And so what do I do? I feel like being a trans person has heightened my spidey senses, if I may, to a point where I'm pretty good at reading a room now. I'm pretty good at knowing where the exits are and sussing out, you know, but then again, I'm constantly proven wrong by that too, because a lot of that is based on visual cues and, you know, sometimes, you know, but yeah, how do I keep myself safe? I'm signed up for, I have benefits now because of this gig at Western. So I'm signed up for a therapist to talk to a counselor to process, like, you know, to take that space, to take my frustrations or to take my conflicts or my, you know, to a professional instead of just sort of like talking to my friends, but which are great. They're great. And my partner's great. But like, you know, getting some help from someone who's outside and a bit disconnected, you know, and the nice thing about that is that can be done like this right now too. So I guess I do a bit of that. And I don't know, there's part of me that has enjoyed the 6-foot rule of social distancing, to be honest. And I kind of hope that we come out of this a little bit more conscious of people's physical space. Because that's one of the things I've struggled with at book signing tables and stuff like that, is like, I love it on the one hand and I miss it. And I'm a hugger, but like, you know, if there's 10 people and like I see my friend and I hug them, my mom's there, I hug her, my uncle's there, I hug him, my cousin's there, my other cousin, my other cousin, my other cousin, my other cousin, my other cousin's there, and I hug them all. And then the next person like is there, and they, you know, then I feel like I can't say, well, no, not, you know, you don't get it, you know. So like there's a physical proximity thing that has to be minded, and you know, figuring out a good, you know, sometimes you know, we have hand signals too, my friends. Where it's like, you know, that if I go like, if I'm tugging on my ear, like, and then a friend of mine taught me a trick about when someone's trying to like suck your life force out through your eyes at the book signing table. I give this to all artists. What you do is, instead of looking at them right in the eye, connecting there visually with them so they can suck your life force out of your eyes, which some people will try to do, look at their ear. Or where their earlobe would be. So you're not looking over their shoulder,
right?
Which they can sense, and that will just, then they'll, you know, look at their earlobe. So you're still focused on them. You're still giving them the attention that they want and deserve. They're a person that wants to talk to you, and that's what the exchange is. But you're not fully connecting right like this.
Right.
So they can't. So there's my little tip for that. And then, you know, there are lots of other tricks that I've turned. And also, one of the things that the pandemic has taught me is just what an emotional toll, like that kind of touring and that kind of like, you know, and how I think we need to start having like more nuanced conversations as artists and presenters about how we not only keep ourselves safe, but operate and have each other's backs more. You know? And yeah.
No, that is really important. I mean, in terms of making art, making stories, and stories are really what I identify as who we are, where we come from, and all of that. And stories are really powerful, and they can be damaging, and they can be life-giving. And so those who do the work have to take care of themselves. Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to end with a quote from a beautiful person called Jack Halberstam, who says in the introduction to Fred Moten and Stefano Harvey's book, it ends with love, exchange, and fellowship. So thank you for your work and all the best with it. And I hope you wear out more shoes. No, more sheets than shoes. I hope you wear out more sheets than shoes. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your fellowship. Thank you for this exchange.
Okay.
It was truly, I knew you were the perfect one to ask. I'm so glad you said yes.
I don't know.
Thanks to every single person who showed up. There's still 365 logins. We don't know.
Holy cow.
Josh is going to download the chat for us because he is an expert. So many, many thanks to Josh as well. Thanks to Michael Milde, from the Dean from Arts and Humanities. Thank you to the funders, and especially thank you to Otoniya, and thanks to every single person who showed up. I will download Josh will download the chat, and my students, as always, my active voice students. I will see you in about 10 minutes. Give me
one more thing. One more thing.
Okay. Yes.
I want to ask everybody, and this is you, including you, to think about your favorite sky. You can share it in the chat, or you can just think about it privately, because the sky is one thing that holds all of us, even though it's an imaginary thing, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And we will spend many more hours. I hope to have you visit me up in the Yukon one day in the winter. I'll get you a parka, don't worry. Oh no, I'll take care of you. I got it. Get you a parka because I want to take you up to Grey Mountain and show you the trans sky, the true winter trans sky.
I would love that.
Pink and blue in all its glory.
Thank you. I would love that.
Thank
Bye.
you so much.
Okay. Bye.